He pitched a rape sketch on live TV, called Liam Neeson a fake fighter, and got banned from Saturday Night Live for being too unbearable to work with. Steven Seagal pissed off so many people, it's a miracle he still finds work. These 10 actors didn't just dislike Seagal, some wanted to see him die on camera, literally. Brian Cox doesn't exactly hold back when he talks about Seagal. The two worked together on The Glimmer Man, and Cox made it very clear he thought Seagal was out of his mind. Not just difficult to work with, actively delusional. Seagal behaved like a diva on set, even refused to do offlines during scenes. For anyone who doesn't know, offlines are when your co-star feeds you lines while the camera's on you. Pretty basic stuff. Most actors do it. It's part of the job, but not Seagal. On The Glimmer Man, the director actually pulled Cox aside and said, "The continuity person will be doing your offlines. Steven won't do them, Steven doesn't do offlines." Cox later wrote in his memoir that Seagal was exactly as ridiculous in real life as he appears on screen. He radiates a studied serenity, as though he's on a higher plane to the rest of us. And while he's certainly on a different plane, no doubt about that, it's probably not a higher one. Seagal suffers from that Donald Trump syndrome of thinking himself far more capable and talented than he actually is, seemingly oblivious to the fact that an army of people are helping to prop up his delusion. Now, Sharon Stone didn't even need to trash Seagal directly, she just dismissed him. That's how little time she has for the guy. They worked together on Above the Law, which was Seagal's debut. It wasn't by no means Seagal's best work, but it still turned out to be somewhat decent, especially since it was his first time testing the waters of Hollywood. For his co-star, though, it might as well have been one of her worst experiences ever. When someone asked her about him years later, Stone said he was an individual who isn't worth the ink it would take to write about him. But she did share one story that kind of says it all. While they were rehearsing a scene, Seagal told her not to stand too close because she was standing in his chi. Supposedly, her presence was throwing off his energy or whatever. Completely ridiculous, but also exactly what you'd expect. A sensei in aikido and a man who's made money from portraying an adept fighter on screen, Seagal presents himself as something of a tough combatant who can deal with most physical threats. According to Charlize Theron, that's all bullshit. I have no problem talking shit about him because he's not very nice to women. So fuck you. At night, I'll go online to watch fighters or watch people fight, and you always come across that odd Seagal video of him fighting in Japan, but he really isn't. He's just incredibly overweight and pushing people. He's overweight and can barely fight. Look it up, it's ridiculous. He's shoving people by the face. It's a whole setup. DMX, rapper, actor, absolute legend. He worked with Seagal not once, but twice. First in Exit Wounds back in 2001, and again in 2019's Beyond the Law. Why he came back for round 2? Probably a paycheck. Because based on how he actually felt about Seagal, there's no other reason this pairing should have happened twice. Here's what DMX had to say about him. Direct quote. "Steven Seagal is a fuck. He's a fucking shithead. With spray-on hair. He talked like he was an old slave master. This guy's a fucker. He's an asshole." That's not a half-baked insult. That's a full-on scorched earth takedown. And yet for some reason, nearly 20 years later, they co-starred again in Beyond the Law, a low-budget, straight-to-video crime flick that nobody saw and even fewer remember. John Leguizamo didn't just dislike Seagal. He built a whole career-long grudge out of it. Their big clash happened on executive decision in 1996. On the very first day of rehearsal, Seagal apparently strolled onto set and said, "I'm in command. What I say is law." Leguizamo thought he was joking. He laughed. Seagal didn't. He taekwondo'd my ass against a brick wall, as Leguizamo put it. Knocked the wind out of him. Couldn't even talk. And it didn't end there. When they were filming Seagal's death scene, Leguizamo showed up just to watch it. Didn't have a scene that day. Just wanted to see him die. That's the level we're dealing with here. Decades later, when Leguizamo played a washed-up action star in The Menu, he based the character on one person, Steven Seagal. When asked about it, he said, "He's kind of a horrible human." This man turned his Seagal hatred into art. Seagal's appearance on Saturday Night Live has been dubbed the worst ever by fans, creators, writers, and performers of the series alike, with Bob Odenkirk taken aback by his complete and utter apathy. The future Breaking Bad star was part of the writing staff and repertory at the time, and he recalled that when Seagal was reading over his sketches, the most ludicrous scenario unfolded after he demanded they be changed, so he got to beat up his scene partners. One of the most famous nightmare can't re-show that ever episodes. He kept saying, "I've never seen your show, I don't know what you do here." Now, SNL's had some rough episodes over the years, but everyone pretty much agrees. Seagal's episode in April 1991 was the absolute worst. David Spade said it was the first time he ever heard people at the show talk about ditching the host entirely and just doing a cast-only episode. That's how bad it was. Seagal didn't want to play along, didn't want to follow the writer's ideas, and flat-out refused to be the butt of any joke. He even pitched his own sketch, where he plays a therapist who hypnotizes a patient and then sexually assaults her. That was his pitch. It got so bad that producers actually considered firing him during the week. They were ready to air the show without a host at all. Lorne Michaels, who's seen every kind of ego come through that building, didn't hold back. He later said Seagal was the biggest jerk to ever host the show. And that's coming from the guy who's had to deal with Chevy Chase. Michael Jai White had a front-row seat to the Steven Seagal experience. And for him, the whole thing was less legendary action hero and more like a guy walking around thinking he's a martial arts god while everyone else quietly rolls their eyes. According to White, Seagal took himself so seriously it actually became funny. In his words, Seagal could have been one of the funniest action comedy guys on the planet, if he didn't take himself so serious. But what really rubbed White the wrong way was how Seagal treated the stunt crew. He said Seagal had a habit of hitting the shit out of his stuntmen, and that a lot of them just put up with it because they didn't want to lose their jobs. And White wasn't having it. He said no one has the right to act like that, especially not someone who's not superior to people who can do what you do. Liam Neeson's never worked with Seagal, and after this, probably never will. A few years back, Neeson was out promoting one of the Taken sequels when Seagal decided to throw some shade. He said Neeson was lucky to be getting work in action movies, even though, according to Seagal, he had no business being in the genre at all, said he wasn't a real fighter, wasn't an action guy, wasn't a warrior, just a dramatic actor getting by with the help of special effects and big budgets. He can't fight. He's not an action movie guy at all, and he's getting action movies now, so that should tell you something. He's a great dramatic actor. Is he an action guy? No. Is he a great fighter? A great warrior? No. Let's be honest. Neeson didn't fire back with a rant. He just said, "I know how to punch," which, let's face it, is the most Irish possible response. But he couldn't resist throwing in a little jab of his own. On Jimmy Kimmel, Neeson said, "I want to know who dyes his hair. Stevie Wonder?" That's one way to end the conversation. Jenny McCarthy had what might be one of the most infamous audition stories in Seagal's long, weird history. Back in 1995, she was up for a role in Under Siege 2, and the audition ended up being just her and Seagal alone in a room. He asked her to sit next to him by the fireplace. Then he said, "This part has nudity in it, and I can't really tell what your body looks like in that dress you're wearing." McCarthy told him she'd been explicitly told the role didn't involve nudity. And Seagal replied, "Well, there is off-camera nudity." That was it. She got up to leave. And before she could walk out, Seagal followed her and threatened her with, "Don't tell anybody, or else." McCarthy wasn't having it. She told him to go buy her Playboy video and walked out.